Did you know that medieval cooks could keep meat fresh for months without a fridge, while your leftovers go bad in a week? Imagine a world where ice was a luxury only kings could dream of, yet peasants feasted on preserved food all winter long. What if I told you their secrets were so clever, you might want to try them in your own kitchen? These aren't just old wives' tales. These are battle-tested tricks from a time when wasting food meant starvation. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll be shocked at how medieval kitchens outsmarted modern tech, and I'll share a method so wild it'll make you rethink your refrigerator. Let's dive into the smoky, bustling world of medieval Europe and uncover the jaw-dropping ways they kept food fresh. Picture a 14th century English village, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and freshly baked bread. In a dim, stone-walled kitchen, a cook is carefully wrapping a leg of mutton in a strange, waxy cloth. No fridge, no freezer, no electricity, yet this meat will stay edible for months. How? The answer lies in a technique called confit, a method so genius it's still used in fancy restaurants today. They'd submerge meat in its own fat, usually goose or pork, and slow cook it until it was sealed in a natural preservative. Then they'd store it in clay pots, buried in cool cellars or packed with salt. The fat created an airtight barrier, keeping bacteria at bay. One French peasant's journal from 1370 mentions eating duck confit that was as tender as the day it was cooked after 6 months. Can you imagine pulling out a perfectly preserved steak from your pantry in June that you cooked last Christmas? What's the longest you've kept food fresh without a fridge? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious. Now let's step into a bustling medieval manor in Normandy. The cook's not just relying on fat. She's got another trick up her sleeve: smoking. They'd hang hams and fish over smoldering oak or applewood fires in a smoky attic or a dedicated smokehouse. The smoke didn't just add that mouth-watering flavor. It dried the food and coated it with natural antimicrobial compounds. A 15th century German text describes how a single smoked sausage could last a family through a harsh winter. But here's the kicker. They didn't just guess at it. Medieval cooks were like scientists, adjusting wood types and smoke times to perfect their craft. Ever tried smoking your own food at home? Share your experience below, because this medieval hack is making a comeback in modern BBQ culture. As we wander through a muddy Yorkshire market, notice the barrels stacked high with something that looks like pickles. Pickling wasn't just for cucumbers. It was a medieval superpower. They'd submerge vegetables, eggs, and even fish in vinegar or brine, sometimes spiced with dill or mustard seeds. The acid in vinegar killed off microbes, and the salt dehydrated any would-be spoilers. A 13th century monk wrote about eating pickled herring that tasted as fresh as the sea after a year in a barrel. But what's wild is how they turned this into an art form. In Italy, they'd layer vegetables with herbs in ceramic jars, creating flavors so complex they'd rival your favorite artisanal pickles today. Have you ever tried pickling something unusual, like eggs or watermelon rind? Let me know in the comments, because medieval cooks would probably give you a nod of approval. Let's pause in a quiet Welsh village, where a farmer's wife is carefully wrapping cheese in a damp cloth. Cheese-making was another medieval secret weapon for keeping food fresh. By turning milk into cheese, they could store dairy for months, even years. Hard cheeses like cheddar, aged in cool caves or cellars, developed rinds that acted like natural armor against mold. A 14th century English record brags about a wheel of cheese that was still good after 2 years. But they didn't stop there. They'd coat cheeses in wax or ash to seal them tighter. Some even buried them in peat bogs for extra preservation. Talk about dedication. What's the oldest cheese you've ever eaten? Share your story below, because medieval cheesemakers might just have you beat. Now, let's head to a chilly Scottish castle where the air is crisp and the pantry is stocked with strange, shriveled fruits. Drying was a go-to method for preserving everything from apples to plums. They'd string fruit slices over hearths or lay them in the sun, letting nature suck out the moisture. Without water, bacteria couldn't grow, and a handful of dried apricots could last a year. A 12th century traveler's account describes munching on dried figs that felt like a taste of summer in the dead of winter. But here's the cool part. They'd often soak these fruits in honey or wine before drying, adding flavor and an extra layer of preservation. Ever tried drying your own fruit at home? Drop your tips in the comments because medieval cooks would love to compare notes. As we cross into a vibrant French monastery, the monks are busy with jars of something sticky and golden. Honey wasn't just a sweetener, it was a medieval preservative powerhouse. Its natural sugars and low water content made it a hostile environment for bacteria. They'd pour honey over fruits, nuts, or even whole fish, sealing them in jars for months. A 15th century Italian recipe book describes honeyed quinces that stayed fresh for a year and were fit for a king. Some archaeologists even found 500-year-old honey in a medieval cellar that was still edible. Can you imagine eating something preserved that long? What's the weirdest thing you've preserved at home? Share it below, because honey's magic might inspire your next kitchen experiment. Let's sneak into a busy tavern in medieval London, where the cook is salting a massive cod. Salt was worth its weight in gold, sometimes literally, because it could preserve food like nothing else. They'd pack fish, pork, or beef in layers of coarse salt, drawing out moisture and creating a bacteria-free zone. A 14th century merchant's log boasts about salted cod that was shipped from Norway to Spain and still tasted perfect after months at sea. But here's the crazy part. They'd reuse the salt, scraping it off one batch to use on the next. Talk about recycling. Have you ever tried curing your own bacon or fish? Let me know in the comments because medieval salting tricks are still alive in modern charcuterie. Now let's visit a cozy Danish farmhouse where the air smells faintly of fermentation. Fermentation wasn't just for beer, it was a way to preserve vegetables and dairy. They'd pack cabbage into crocks with salt, letting natural bacteria turn it into sauerkraut. This tangy, probiotic-rich food could last through the winter, and it was a lifesaver during famines. A 13th century Swedish chronicle mentions a village surviving a harsh winter on sour cabbage and bread. They also fermented milk into yogurt-like curds, which kept for weeks. Ever tried fermenting your own food, like kimchi or kombucha? Share your experiments below, because medieval fermenters were basically the original hipsters. As we stroll through a sunlit Tuscan vineyard, notice the barrels of wine and vinegar lining the cellar. Alcohol wasn't just for drinking, it was a preservation tool. They'd soak fruits or herbs in wine to make infused concoctions that lasted months. Vinegar, too, was a star player, used to preserve everything from onions to walnuts. A 15th century French cookbook describes vinegar cherries that were as bright as the day they were picked after a year. The alcohol and acid worked together to kill off spoilage, and the flavors got better with time. What's the most creative way you've used vinegar or wine in your cooking? Drop it in the comments, because medieval cooks would cheers to your ingenuity. Let's wrap up in a grand English manner, where the Lord's table is piled high with preserved delicacies. These medieval tricks, confit, smoking, pickling, cheese-making, drying, honey, salting, fermentation, and alcohol, weren't just about survival. They were about turning necessity into art. Every bite told a story of ingenuity, from the peasant's smoked sausage to the noble's honeyed quinces. These methods kept entire villages fed through brutal winters, long voyages, and lean years. And the best part? Many of these techniques are making a comeback. Artisanal pickles, smoked meats, and fermented foods are all over modern menus, proving medieval cooks were way ahead of their time. So, what's the takeaway? Next time you open your fridge, think about the medieval cook who kept her family fed with nothing but a fire, some salt, and a whole lot of creativity. These shocking tricks didn't just preserve food, they preserved a way of life. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these methods blew your mind the most? Would you try confit, pickling, or maybe even burying cheese in your backyard? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if you're as obsessed with medieval ingenuity as I am, and subscribe for more wild dives into history. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. It's going to be even crazier. Oh, and one last thing. If you're feeling brave, try this medieval challenge. Pickle a vegetable using just vinegar and salt, and let me know how it turns out. Let's keep the medieval kitchen alive.